When last we met, our intrepid hero, Baltec Budapest, has been transformed into a half-human, half-Varger hybrid and is being hunted by the evil Professor Ricket to lead his Varger hybrid army against the Zoldani consulate. Baltec is currently hiding beneath the Ephemeral Glades, frozen ice sheets, impenetrable to the drone clones hunting him across the universe. But when the ice melts, there will be a window of opportunity where Baltec will be exposed and Professor Ricket can seek his revenge. Can our hero survive and escape, or will he fall back into the professor's clutches? Stay tuned to find out.
Greetings, metallurgists. Welcome to another review here on Heavy Metallurgy. I'm Marty. Good to see you. And today I will be joined by my brilliant co-conspirator, Alan.
Good to see you, Marty. Thanks for letting me help review the new Lord Weird Slough Feg EP we're about to talk about.
Yeah, it is called Traveler Supplement 1, The Ephemeral Glades, which is an EP. It is due to be released on the 11th of April, 2025 on Cruz del Sur Music. We have a 20-minute long EP at hand by what I would consider an American heavy metal treasure. I mean, I always have loved this band. Some albums better than others, but yeah. First of all, what did you think of first impression of this EP?
For this EP, first impression was, cool. They're revisiting, my favorite period of the band. Traveler is easily my favorite Sloth Feg album. They've got several great ones in their catalog, but that's the album for me. But it's been over 20 years since that album came out. And so it's really kind of interesting and fun to see them going back to it. And it's the kind of thing that, makes for a good sequel. Sometimes, sequels in heavy metal don't always have the best reputation. These, when you go back to, Abigail Part 2, Operation Mindcrime Part 2, these albums don't always pan out particularly well. But here, they're just kind of picking up where it left off. They went back to the same studio. They have the same producer. They're even using the same bloody microphones, apparently, that they used on the original Traveler recordings. And again, it's, a concept album with this, vast kind of space odyssey theme based on an old role-playing game. And so, yeah, they're just delivering kind of, the next installment of that particular adventure. I'm a nerd and I love that shit.
Yeah. Well, for me, the concept, and yes, they made a note in the notation in the bio information about how it was recorded with the same producer in the same studio, same mics, and you're going to be continuing on with a story from a much loved album, which is this one here, Traveler. Mm-hmm. And let's be honest, those are some pretty big shoes to fill.
And, that can go wrong.
Yep. And the first thing I would have to say right away, my first impression was first song, Knife World comes rolling in. I listened to the whole song. I enjoy the song, but it made me go to Traveler and hit play on that one to compare the sound. And if you're going to compare, this is not comparing apples to apples here. Same band, same studio, same producer, same mics, different sound. It's a
20 years difference. Yeah.
It's a 20 years difference. I would say, to me, this is a band that plays probably in standard E tuning. They're playing on this EP, a lot of the material, the riffs are higher up on the neck. There's some jangly chord type stuff going on. There's more, there's still riffs here, don't get me wrong, but there's more of a jam session vibe to this. Mm-hmm. And the production kind of alludes to that, and it feels like a band in a room with older amps turned up loud. So you're not using a distortion pedal to get your gain. You're using the volume distorting through the speakers of an old amp is what it sounds like to me. And it kind of changes the feel. It still sounds like Lord Weird Slough Feg, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But it lacks, the production right away is less, there's less low end here. There's less fullness. And if you really sit here and listen close, about third or fourth time, I'm starting to notice, I'm not going to say that there are mistakes per se, but there's a looseness to the playing. There's like an occasional transition or a few notes here and there that aren't wrong, but they feel like they're a bit loose. And, there's a producer here, but he obviously is a producer that is not striving for perfection. Like if you listen to Traveler, there's nothing out of place. There's nothing a little bit loosey-goosey going into a transition. So, I mean, my first real notice before I really started picking apart the songs was the sound. Not a bad sound. This live in the rehearsal room has that kind of feel to it. It sounds unpolished. It sounds a bit rushed, which you're going to get if you're going settling for some of the sloppy notes here and there. A bit rushed. But musically, the band is still as strong as it ever was. And we can get into that here, obviously, as we go through it a bit more. But
Yeah,
what did you think about the sound field?
I would agree with your points. Yeah, it does. It sounds like Sloth Feg.
Yeah.
But yes, I think the words that underproduced and maybe a bit rushed. It feels like they had this idea. I don't know if they're trying to work it in between other recording sessions or in between tours. But it's like hey, just get the band together. Let's do this and just kind of really like you said, jam it out, and let's not worry about it being picture perfect. Let's not fiddle with it a lot after the fact. Let's just record it, check it over one time, make sure everything's pretty good, and roll with it. That is kind of the vibe that I get from it too. And it's not a huge negative point. I'm not saying like this sank it or anything, but it does have that kind of, like you said, a little underproduced, and if things here and there aren't quite cleaned up 100%, you get the sense that's what they were going for. They wanted this to feel like a kind of a very short addendum. This wasn't supposed to be a major release. Scalzi even mentions in the sort of bio notes, I was like, I wanted to just do a release and just kind of trim away all the flab, I think was the word he used. Don't need to worry about every solo going on forever and getting all these extra little bells and whistles on it. It's like, nope, we're just leaving all that on the cutting room floor, and here you go. This is just the core of what it is, and we're done.
You know what? I can completely respect that. But as I'll mention at the end of this, I will say the last half of this EP in particular, there's some pretty short songs. There's one song under 3 minutes. There's one song early on that feels just kind of like a lost piece to a random song. I mean, there's parts. It just seems like when some of these songs are just about to go somewhere, take off, they kind of stop. They're out. And it feels like an unfinished piece of music. Like, okay, we're going somewhere really cool here. And then, oh, nope, that's done. Next song. It feels like this EP, this could have been a killer album if they would have fleshed out. They left a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor. It just seemed like I would have been interested to hear where some of these songs could have went. You know what I mean?
Yes, they may have left a little too much on the cutting room floor here. Maybe it needed like that 2% body fat flab put back on. Yeah. That's a good point, Marty. Yeah, but yeah, let's talk some songs and see what we're thinking about these.
Yeah.
Knife World is the opener. Yep. And yeah, it's a 5-minute track, so it feels like a reasonable length, but it also takes it a minute or two to kind of get going. It starts with a really nice, Iron Maiden inspired gallop. It's kind of meat and potatoes, Lord Weird Slough Feg, kind of opening. Sounds great. Kind of reassures you right away that, yep, this is going to be, more of what we expect from Sloth Feg. It's been a while since the band released some new material. The last album was 2019, so it's been a 6-year hiatus.
Yeah.
But, right off the bat, they're playing that, big, friendly gallop that tells you, the band is back. But yeah, this song, it feels like it does take a couple of minutes for it to, fully hit its stride. And so it does feel like a short 5-minute song to me. What are your impressions on it?
I would say Knife World to me, feels like the most sussed out, complete song on the album. The riffs are really good. They launch it off, like we said, a galloping riff, but before that, there's a long intro, a big build up to the meat of the song, where there's a lot of interplay back and forth between Scalzi and Tringali. These guys are both scary good players, and it really is fun to hear, the solo work. They have a very keen, unique ear for what Lord Weird is, and having a lot of room and space for this interplay between musicians is excellent. I've always liked that about the band. Again, I mentioned higher up on the neck riffs, and this song has a lot of that. It kind of gives it a jangly feeling.
Yes.
So it feels very free and engaging. Like I said, here's where the jam element may come into it. There's more spacious room for musicians to interact. The jangly chords. There's an elevated spirit to the song, and Mike's vocals. Again, he sounds like Mike. He does a great job. There's a lot of phrasing on this that reminds me of phrasing on the Traveler album. I don't know if that was kind of a conscious thing or just kind of the way he does it. I don't know. But yeah, for me, I think this is a good lead-off track.
It is.
It goes somewhere. The palm muted crunching is kind of Maiden-esque, and there's an independent bass line. He isn't just following the chords. This is a musician's band. You could tell these guys, they know their way around scales. They know a way around each other's style, and they exploit it and have fun with it. And I think that is one thing I take away from this whole EP is there's a lot of that happening.
Yes, I'd agree completely. And yes, this song, this one does feel very much in the spirit of the original Traveler album. It fits in really, really well with that. Cosmonic vagrancy on a two-faced chronic. Cascading amongst the stars. But yeah, then we start moving through some shorter pieces of music.
Yeah, the Black Circle is only 1 minute and 41 seconds.
It's an instrumental.
Yeah.
And it does feel oddly placed here. It's like, I'm not sure why it's necessary, because there's not like a lot of, on a concept, recording like this, sometimes you need these for a certain transition, just to deliver like a little spoken narration to connect this part to that part or something. This piece doesn't really do that. It doesn't seem. It's just kind of floating there.
A chunk. It's a chunk.
Oh, it's a 90-second interlude. There's nothing. It's not badly done, but it doesn't feel necessary here.
It's of all the tracks on the album, it's the slowest, but it's not a slow song. But it kind of strikes me as more of a nod to traditional doom on this one. There's kind of a mournful dueling harmony and lead work going on. Mm-hmm. Again, it would have been interesting to hear this song evolve into something more than just a snippet. But the thing that's weird about the placement of the track is it doesn't flow really that great into the next track, Mission to Mithril. It feels just like a loose end, because Mission to Mithril has kind of a different feel to the whole thing. So this is kind of an afterthought chunk to me.
Yeah, it feels kind of out of place. Again, like you said, you have kind of the long build up into Knife World, then the meat of Knife World.
Yep.
Then it feels like you're doing like another lead in a different style to something else. But like you said, it doesn't lead into Mithril at all. So yeah, it just feels maybe, out of place, left over. I'm not sure, but it doesn't really work here as track number 2. But then you mentioned Mission of Mithril has a different feel. So yeah, it's another short one.
It is. I mean, but it's more of a mid-paced rocker and distinct riffs on display. They've got definite verse lines established. There's direction in the song, but there's that noticeable jam session spirit to this, as among other tracks as the EP unfolds. But a lot of space. The band leaves for guitar interplay and that freedom, an obvious salute to the old ways of rock and roll, which I think is kind of always been a part of this band, which has become a bit more established as they've gone on. I think they were a lot more focused on the riff and the song, and now, there's elements of riff, but there's a lot more space to play, which, you get a bunch of old guys that have been playing together for a long time that are this good. That's kind of a cool addition. But yeah, it's a good song. We got a lot of fun and good solo work in here. Mike sounds great. It's still, I think we're still in a good position.
It starts out, it develops as a nice song, but as you mentioned earlier, it feels like there needed to be a bit more here. The song's cool, but it kind of ends just when you're wanting it to keep going. And you're right, it does have that kind of looser feel. And that has been more and more kind of a element to Sloth Feg material over time, that they've kind of, gotten comfortable that way. And Scalzi's even kind of mentioned this in interviews that, early on, like up through at least Traveler, he was very focused on, writing everything, having it all be very tight, because he felt, he had something to prove. that he really did want to be recognized for his, talent and ability as a songwriter, as a lyricist, etc. But, by his own admission, by about the time, Traveler was completed, he kind of felt like, okay, I've accomplished that. The Metal Underground definitely and rightfully recognizes him, like you said, as a real talent.
Yeah.
And since then, he's kind of felt like, okay, there's not that same drive to, prove myself anymore. And that would definitely lend itself to letting the songs open up and kind of, let it, as you said, jam a little bit more rather than having, thinking like every riff is going to be intricately locked to this riff, to that rhythm and stuff. And just like, again, get the band together and let's just jam this thing out. And it's not a problem.
No,
but
they're good at it. They're good at it.
They are good at it. I do think, I will say, I think Sloth Feg's maybe gotten a little too comfortable doing it over the past decade, though.
Fair.
Sometimes that they, have gotten themselves a little bit where they're kind of treading water. They're not losing any ground. They're not floundering, but they're not making a lot of, forward progression the way they did across all of the albums up through at least Traveler, maybe even Hardworlder. You kind of got to a
atavism,
point
there. Atavism rules.
Atavism's right there kind of on that, line. But you kind of get, right there, beyond that. You start to like, the Ape Uprising and stuff. And it's kind of like, you kind of know what to expect. And you play the album, it's like, yeah, this is kind of what I expected. And you kind of lost that sense of unpredictability that you had with earlier Sloth Feg, where they were really, again, zeroed in on branding themselves as, kind of, top of the food chain and very unique.
Yeah.
So, that's probably more exposition than we needed for a 2-minute 30 second
No, I think it's important here because it kind of hits the nail on the head where we're at here. Because, I mean, if you're a Slough Feg fan, there is nothing here to turn you away.
No, you're going to play it and you're going to like it.
They're cultivating their fan base here, but they're not. We know what the sound is. We know what this band has to offer as far as identity goes. What I'm really truly missing are those awe-inspiring riffs that just no matter what I'm doing, I'm playing air guitar. I'm stopping what I'm doing to play air guitar along with these awesome riffs that we find on the first 4 albums easily.
Yeah. This whole album and concept may be about, expanding across, an entire galaxy, but Sloth Feg's, kind of keeping it, in their own little planetary orbit a bit. They're not, really trying anything that adventurous or dangerous. It's like, we'll stay right here on this one moon and we'll let you guys go out there and, explore and try the more daring stuff. We're comfy right here. We're going to do our thing and we're going to do it well, but we're going to kind of stay more local maybe.
Freezing on the surface of the sound, riding on the surface of the glade, with a hostile purpose to.
Which brings us to the title track. We're about the midway point on the EP. I would say with that, there's definitely kind of as far as feel and mood goes, we're kind of at the creative apex of the album, of the EP here. There's an ascending riff throughout this thing that really builds anticipation, and Mike kind of slides into a higher register of his voice that highlights that ascending. It kind of takes you along with it, like, oh, I haven't felt a bit of excitement yet. I've heard a lot of killer solos. I've heard some great vocals. I've heard some decent riffs, and now I'm starting to feel a little bit of an edge of anticipation here, which I think for the midway point, it was a good way. It kind of breaks away from the 4 guys jamming in a room thing a little bit.
It does, yep. And I agree. This is a point where, there are, kind of a bit of a highlight, and it kind of plays in part of that, maybe that it's leaning into one of the big themes of Traveler, which is this whole kind of obsession with plant-based ecosystems, which apparently was a pretty big component for a lot of the original Traveler role-playing game adventures, that you constantly had these things with spores, were the big theme on the original Traveler album. And with this album, it's these ephemeral glades, which is this kind of weird ecosystem on this ice planet, which is where you wouldn't think of there being much of a flora, but in this case there is. And Mike talked about that a little bit in sort of the notes that we got with the promo, and you could tell he was excited about the idea, that he kind of liked leaning into that with the lyrics a little bit. That, yeah, it kind of goes back to the game's obsession with focusing on plant life, and I wanted to do that with part of this EP too. So once again, you could see that made the creative juices get flowing in him a little bit more. And so, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that this one, stands out a bit on the EP.
And the whole concept too is they have free reign over the concept. I don't know of any other band. I mean, maybe there are other bands that are covering this particular game, but in this concept, but not that I've ever heard. How about you?
I don't think I've heard anyone else use Traveler as source material. Other bands have certainly done these kind of, space opera, sci-fi, science fantasy type concepts. But yeah, I don't think Traveler's gotten tapped into much. It wasn't a particularly successful role-playing game. It was meant to be the outer space version of Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure.
One of these two intellectual properties took off, and the other didn't. The only other reference I can remember seeing to Traveler in pop culture is in the Josh Whedon's Firefly series. That it was apparently a pretty big influence on him when he was putting that idea together. And in the pilot episode, actually, there's one of the lines when they're first launching the Firefly ship for the first time. Walsh tells everybody, like, welcome aboard, travelers, strap in. And the word is very deliberately meant as a nod to the old game.
But, see, when I first got this album, I was thinking there was an old comic book. I can't remember it was called Alien Legion, that had a dude that looked just like this, actually.
Okay.
So I was always wondering if there was a connection there, but I don't think there was. So
I'm a nerd, but even my nerddom has its boundaries.
Right on.
Escape the Federation's gaze. A race of hybrids still intact.
Anyway, what have we got after Ephemeral Glades, Marty?
We slide into magnetic fluctuations.
This one always seems to kind of just slip right by me. And maybe it's just, that it's following, one of the, better tracks. There's nothing wrong here. It's not like it's a, whoa, what happened moment. But this is like, okay, it's, Sloth Feg doing Sloth Feg for 3 minutes, and then it's on to the next song. It just feels like one of those kind of middle of the recording songs that sometimes your brain just never quite registers, even though I've played it a bunch of times. It's the one track that just still kind of goes one ear and out the other. But did it click better with you?
Here for me is where the EP kind of starts to slide and feel a bit rushed, a bit incomplete. I mean, I do like the fact that there's some Twin Thin Lizzy caliber guitar lines kind of act as a hook of the song. They bring it back a couple times. It's a mid-paced track. Mike is kind of glued to the riffs. So I thought the lyrics felt a bit predictable and even a bit claustrophobic. As the track breaks away from that out of the verses, it goes into this kind of it hints at a really nice music break coming up, but then the song ends. It just starts getting into it, spacious. I'm like, okay, the song's going to open up. They're going to go somewhere cool with it. They mess around with it for a minute or so, and then the song ends. So they shut it down, and it's starting to feel like it's an incomplete thought, which I kind of felt the exact same way on Ice Shelf Stomp. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this one's paced a little bit differently. It's meant to be a little slower, a little heavier. Yeah. But yeah, once again, it's only double checking here, but it's another one that's barely.
It's under 3 minutes.
Yeah, it doesn't even quite make it to 3. I was going to say it was barely 3, but technically
could have been a hardcore song.
Yeah. And so, like, once again, it's like, okay, yeah, they're changing the mood here a little bit. We're kind of maybe, different chapter of the story, switching to a different scene, different character, but you're there for such a short period of time, it doesn't have much of an opportunity to really draw you in.
But I do think they kind of righted the ship, so to speak, on the Varger reprise, which is the closing track to the EP.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I thought this one kind of had an epic bigness to it.
Yes.
The riffs and huge lead lines. It make it feel like a strong closing statement. They needed a sort of a bookend. You had a really good starter, good ending song.
Mm-hmm.
And the riffs kind of bear some similarities to tracks found on Traveler too. So you're kind of trying to tie the concept together a bit, help connect the concept to what I consider an endlessly classic, perfect riff album, by the way. They end on a punchy note with this one. I love the palm muted counter riff that coexists with the bigger progression to fade the album out. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yes, this one, a bookend is a really good way to put it, because it goes back and catches that same kind of, like you said, uplifting kind of, a more epic spirit that they had on the opener with Knife World. And yes, it definitely pays homage to the original Traveler album. I would like to sometimes sit down and, play Traveler 2 or 3 times back to back to back, and then play this EP. I wouldn't be surprised if we could start to pick out that there are actually some riffs or refrains that are
kind of got the
from
impression.
Traveler.
I was going to take the time and go through and listen and pinpoint it, but that would have been a lot of
I haven't had the time to do that here.
I think
but
it is
I'll bet you could do that.
Yeah.
You might realize like, oh, there's a reason this riff sounds so familiar. It's from track 4 on Traveler, and I just didn't completely make that connection. So once again, even if they're not picking up some of those exact musical themes, it does show that they really did, aim to kind of capture the same spirit as the original, and did so pretty well on this track, I'd say. So a good way to close the album or the EP out here.
From Mithril starboard far and wide, hiding on the surface of your mind.
So what are our final thoughts on all this kind of up and down? We've gone up and down quite a bit for such a short EP.
It's funny too. I feel like I had a lot of negative things or not so positive things to say about this EP, but ultimately, Slough Feg for me, even at half mast, is still better than a lot of bands in the genre that they live in, and it's because they know who they are. They have got their own distinct identity that is just, it's so special it stands out. Even if it is if this is just a jam album, it's still, I've had fun listening to it. I haven't gotten sick of it. I've really kind of enjoyed listening to what they're doing musically and in the solos, and I find myself missing the riff. I miss a build up and a takedown and long music breaks coming back into this riff. It just, they kind of left that on the cutting room floor, I think. But as a fan of Lord Weird Slough Feg, I'm getting it. I'm going to buy this when it comes out, whether it's on CD or LP, we'll see. But I think anybody that's a fan of this band, we're being ultra critical because that's what we're supposed to do in these things.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a victory. Is it a flawless? Is it a finish him victory? No, it isn't. But it makes me curious what's going to come next. What were your thoughts?
It's similar, yeah. For Sloth Feg fans, if you're a Sloth Feg fanboy, buy this, you will enjoy it. You'll probably, if your big complaint is probably going to be, I want more, because it is only a 20-some minute EP. If you're a fanboy who can look at the bands you love somewhat critically, you're going to notice some of the things Marty and I have mentioned. That some of these songs don't feel like they're quite complete. That it does feel. It feels kind of rushed, which again is just, it's odd because Sloth Feg has not put out a lot of material in recent years. Again, it's been 6 years since New Organon came out, and you had 5 years before that since Digital Resistance. And it's not like there's lots of, EPs or anything between. So you're basically looking at, in the past decade, they've only put out 2 albums. So for them to come out with
they just put out a compilation on Nameless Grave Records called Radical Man, which I forgot to grab off the shelf. I think there's one or two new songs on it, actually.
It's mostly demo stuff. So that's not a thing. So the fact that, we've got that we only have an EP's worth of material here, and it still feels kind of rushed and underproduced, is kind of like, what was the hurry? You've had lots of time to work on new material, and what was the rush? Why put it out in this format? Like we talked about at the start. I can appreciate a band wanting to trim away, a lot of the fluff and just try to put, the core material out there. But sometimes you can snip away a little bit too much also. Yeah. And this one does feel like there could have been more here. It definitely could have been expanded. Maybe they want to try to do this as more of a serial kind of thing. And rather than just putting out Traveler Part 2 and we're done with it, maybe next year we get another supplement to Traveler. Maybe 18 months from now we get supplement number 3. and they can kind of turn it into a serialized story adventure, which would be a really cool concept.
Kind of a cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it could work that way. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But for a band that has not been churning out a ton of releases, it just does feel a little odd that this is what they come out with, kind of breaking through that ice shelf right now.
Yeah.
And sure, members may be busy with other projects, other commitments, tours and such. But yeah, I think the bottom line is, we'd all like to see more Sloth Feg material, see them kind of, really reach for the stars again and put out something that's going to be, brilliant and flawless the way we know they can, because they did it so many times early on in their career. Yeah, so here at the conclusion, will Baltic escape the professor? Will the rock slam back into the Zoldani consulate? Will the evil professor use his psionic weapons to take down his foes and avoid the Federation's grasp once again? Tune in next time.
Hopefully.
And find out. Maybe, if they do another EP supplement in the near future.
Do you have any call to arms?
I do not. Well, I do have one call to arms, and it's more of a call out. I'm calling out Cruisdale Sir for once again putting some really crappy cover art on one of their releases. This EP's cover is
bad.
It's just black and says Traveler with a blue line on it. I mean, it basically take the original Traveler cover and just take away all the artwork, leave the red line, make it
the same
blue,
Traveler font, and
use the same font, but there's just no picture on it. And Cruisdale Sir, bless your heart, but you've been skimping on the art budget for some of your releases over the past year or two. You're a label with a really good reputation and a cool roster of bands.
Here's the last one. Look at that.
Yeah, you've got to make these a little more visually appealing if you want folks to stop and click that thumbnail when they're shopping online, or pick up that CD and look at it for a minute and think about giving you some of their money when they're standing in a record store. I could go on, but yeah, there's several releases Cruisdale Sir has put out in the past 24 months where the art leaves me shaking my head. And especially, Sloth Feg's got to be considered one of your core stable bands. Why you doing them this way? I get that it's only an EP, but again, with something that's got as much rich imagination built into it as Traveler, even the EP supplement deserves to have something cool on the cover rather than just a blue line and a black space.
Agreed.
That's my I'm not going to go any further on that. But Marty, did you have an album you'd actually like to call out here for Call to Arms?
Yeah, Call to Arms. Here we go. We're going to be talking about Void Chaser. The EP is called Trust. It's self-released, and it came out on the 7th of March, 2025. And I don't know if you've listened to Void Chaser or not, Alan.
Don't know this one.
They are a Montreal/Stockholm based quartet, and Trust is the band's 4th EP. They have no full-length albums. And they're basically in the progressive heavy metal realm, which typically isn't something that I gravitate towards, but there's a thick and atmospheric progressive metal with a dark edge thing going on here. Predominant pitch singing, but there's also deathly growls, like on the track Dogma, and another one as well, which places emphasis on the heavier moments in their sound. I mean, overall, it's a very cinematic feel to this band, thanks to dense synth work. The vastness of the production also attributes to this, and even some saxophone embellishment, which I typically hate, but in this context, it really worked. There was a slow part where they put a lot of reverb on the saxophone. It kind of leaned into the dreary vibe of the track and of the EP. I've only listened to this like 2 or 3 times, and this EP Trust gives 3 weighty tracks with a lot of variation, great musicianship, and overall composition to be found on it. And I found myself enjoying the EP, even though this typically isn't a style that I listen to often. I can always appreciate musicianship like this, but they often leave me stranded looking for more emotion and feel. And this album actually has that. So nice, dense, deep sound field, and good mix of vocals. I don't need to have death vocals in this stuff, but it was, when it came in, it was kind of surprising and a nice touch. So yeah, definitely worth a shout out for sure. So Trust by Void Chaser, definitely a good band to check out if that is your jam. But yeah, without further ado, I guess that's it. Alan, thanks for joining me on this one. I really appreciate it. A lot of fun as always. Well, cool. That's it, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to check out Heavy Metallurgy for more live streams, more reviews, and of course, more metal. We'll see you next time. Cheers.